Hello and welcome back. Hi, this is Dr. Kenneth Mewich, Fibromyalgia Wellness Center. I left a message about 25 minutes ago. Hopefully everybody's seated, waiting expectantly for information concerning what we're going to be discussing and talking about. And it's very, very interesting. This is something, as I mentioned, that I could be talking about for quite a while because of its importance. It has to do with the weather and how weather affects patients. Now, I know the specialty that we have is fibromyalgia, but keep in mind that if you have a health problem that is inflammatory, especially if it involves rheumatological conditions, osteoarthritis, MS, and a variety of other conditions, the weather and weather changes does have an effect on how you feel and how your body reacts at that time. There were studies that were done years ago, matter of fact, decades ago, and on this same subject. And most of them were from the Midwest, where Wisconsin and I believe Minnesota, Minnesota and Wisconsin. And the reason why they were chosen was that they are so specific for the four seasons, summer, fall, winter, and spring. And with those changes, there's obviously weather changes involved in that. And they found that those areas especially had problems with people calling in or checking in with a variety of different aches and pains and so forth because of weather changes. That's why for example, Arizona is one of the best places that you could actually be if you have some real health problems that are inflammatory, that are affected by the weather, especially fibromyalgia. Arizona has really, the Phoenix metropolitan area has just two seasons, and that is warm and hot for the most part. However, we do have storms. We have seasonal storms, and that definitely affects the patients when they come in. They might come in a week ahead of time, and all of a sudden they start feeling additional aches and pains and so forth. For fibromyalgia patients, that's a real problem because they're already having problems as far as fatigue and muscle aches and pains and literally dozens of other symptoms. And so if the weather actually does cause problems, it magnifies the aches and pains and so forth that they have. And as I mentioned before, every fibromyalgia patient has additional conditions, not just fibromyalgia. So if you already have an osteoarthritic condition, then you have fibromyalgia, then you have weather changes, oh my goodness, that adds on to so many other aches and pains and so forth that you have. So what a fibromyalgia patient actually has as far as additional conditions that are affected would be the fatigue and the sleep patterns, the headaches, muscle pains, and again a number of symptomatic flare-ups throughout the body. And we're constantly explaining to patients the importance of this and to understand that our treatment is not going in reverse or worsening. It's just the fact that that's the normal reaction that the body has from weather changes. Now, the best part of this is that once our fibromyalgia patients go through the complete protocol, what happens is that they have very little after effect from weather changes, which really makes it great. I've stayed in touch with fibromyalgia patients that have gone through our protocol for decades, and I keep on asking them, so how's the weather changes, so forth and so on. And I would say at least 95% of them have none to very little symptomatic reactions or changes once they've gone through our protocol. And so that's a big plus in itself. The history of the temperature itself, of course, ranges quite a bit. One of the things that adversely affects the fibromyalgia patients is temperature changes. Now in Arizona, we have, like I say, tepid, warm to extreme heat. Even though I have a shirt and tie on, it's about 110 today. It's going to be, I think, 117 tomorrow and 115. I'm in an air-conditioned location, and so consequently I feel rather comfortable. Matter of fact, with the air conditioning on, sometimes it gets too cold for me. For fibromyalgia patients, they have two extremes. They have the extreme reaction of hot. So, in other words, the fibromyalgia patients that are coming in now are having some additional aches and pains and fatigue primarily because of the excess heat. But when it gets cooler, Cold, think about it. I've mentioned before, heat is a vasodilator. You lay in the sun, very nice. It opens all of the blood vessels up and so forth. But when it gets cooler, when it gets cold in your areas, that's a constrictor, a blood constrictor, blood vessel constrictor. Whoa! So you have blood that will shiver and so forth. And so for fibromyalgia patients, they have a tightening of their body's musculature and their joints, of course. And so they have a lot more problems with that. So temperature extremes, to go from hot to extreme hot, to get from tepid to cold and so forth. That's why the seasonal changes. Now, will they stay? Usually it takes anywhere from 10 days to 2 weeks for a fibromyalgia patient to reestablish some normalcy as far as the body's ability to cope with certain things. I myself went to California. I was working in California with doctors and some seminars on our fibromyalgia protocol, and after so many years of working, my hands have been used, shall we say, more than normal, and so consequently, I had some problems as far as working with my hands. Even though I wasn't working with patients, still I had that soreness because of the humidity. And so that's another factor that you have to take in consideration. When there's humidity changes, that again adversely affects the patients, the amount of water vapor that's present, so to speak, in the air. When the humidity is low, most fibromyalgia patients feel pretty good. When it gets high, near the area of precipitation, and that's one of the next factors we're going to cover, then patients have a lot of problems, again, with the fatigue and muscle aches and pains and soreness. Now, when you have precipitation, you have barometric pressure changes. And so along with temperature, barometric pressure changes is a major aspect that affects any patients really have inflammatory responses, especially fibromyalgia patients. Barometric pressures actually change when there are weather changes. Barometric pressures tend to be quite high during storms, weather fronts, and so forth. And so again, many times patients will come in days before a storm, and I'll be checking the weather regularly. I'll say, well, it's supposed to have a storm here in another couple days, and so we'll have to work our way through this and explain to them why they're having the additional aches and pains. If it should by chance rain, that's precipitation. And precipitation, again, could be rain, sleet, snow, so forth and so on, adversely affects patients. Now, here's something else, and we're going to get into this with precipitation and wind, and that's another factor. So we have temperature changes, we have barometric pressure changes, we have humidity, we have precipitation and wind. Now, in Arizona, we have something called haboobs. No, I'm not making fun of anybody. Haboobs are actual windstorms that blow up unbelievable amounts of sand, and they can go up a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles in the air and literally cover a city with the wind. Oftentimes, this is just prior to precipitation or rain. However, sometimes the precipitation gets caught in the dust and sort of really never occurs. So those windstorms that actually are causing barometric pressure changes and precipitation. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. All of a sudden, something happened and I lost it. What we're talking about is weather changes. I hope I didn't lose anybody. Temperature, barometric pressures, humidity, precipitation, and wind. We covered most of these except for the wind aspect, and that was part of the barometric pressure changes and the precipitation and the wind. The wind is very, very interesting because we're in a valley in Phoenix, Phoenix metropolitan area, and so we get unusual wind gusts sometimes. Some are good and some are bad, but that also blows a lot of garbage up in the air. So if you have any allergies or asthma and so forth and so on, it can be a real problem. For fibromyalgia patients, again, wind is a factor that can trigger fatigue and some of the other things, including headaches and so forth, for fibromyalgia sufferers. Keep in mind, again, this is not just for fibromyalgia patients, but Keep in mind also that fibromyalgia oftentimes is just one of the many symptoms that, or conditions that fibromyalgia patients have. So if you have rheumatoid, if you have lupus, if you have MS, if you have osteoarthritis, headaches, so forth and so on, fibromyalgia makes them worse. And then temperature obviously is another factor that can bring about all of those other aspects that make a person feel like they're getting worse and not better. We're constantly stressing to patients that there's a lot of things around them that obviously they can't control. Now, if there's going to be a number of weather changes, if at all possible, we tell the patients to stay as active as they can, but also to try to stay out of the outside. Excessive heat, obviously, so stay inside where it's cooler. If it's going to rain, barometric pressure changes, can't do much about that. That goes right into your home. But again, stretching, general stretching exercises, so forth and so on, can really minimize or reduce some of the symptoms that fibromyalgia patients have. And that's the most important thing, is to keep everybody on a level keel, so to speak, and not excessively looking at things that might adversely affect people that will make their conditions worse. Whether or not you can do something with the weather is a real factor. You know, during the summertime also, even though people have fibromyalgia and other conditions, they like to go on vacations. Just a reminder, if you're going to go to California, again, the humidity, especially around the ocean, is going to be different than in Arizona, or maybe any other state that you have. If you're going to go to Florida, that, of course, I constantly have patients coming in telling me how humid it is over there and how stiff and achy and sore. Now, that's a warm area, but yet the humidity supersedes the fact that people are having problems like that. And so the humidity in itself, and oftentimes just almost immediate rainstorms that come from nowhere, can have a real problem with patients that have any inflammatory condition, but especially fibromyalgia. So check the weather, where you're going to be going, and plan accordingly instead of just trying to have a guessing game. If you're going to have some symptoms, again, try to stay somewhat active, but don't overdo it, because obviously that's one of the things that will aggravate your condition. On the other hand, rest at this time is a good factor, but check the weather where you're going to make sure that you understand that if you're going to go to some place that's going to have storms or a dramatic change in the weather that you're going from to, that you're going to probably have a reaction. So if you're going from Arizona where it's 110 and you go to the Midwest where it's going to be maybe 75 to 80 degrees, there's a good chance that you're going to have some kind of reaction. So make sure you give yourself an extra day, see if you can relax and still enjoy yourself. Again, if you're going near water, again, expect barometric pressure changes, a change in humidity, so forth and so on. And so consequently, again, take that in consideration. I want to thank you very, very much. Sorry for that all of a sudden loss. I'll tell you, you can't live with our new things. You can't live without them, I guess. But wishing everybody a wonderful day, great weekend. If you're in severe heat, please hydrate yourself as much as you can. Stay out of the heat if at all possible. That is one of the problems in Arizona. If you're in other locations, again, try to enjoy this week and look forward to seeing you next week again with another exciting subject. Make sure you tell all your family and friends and doctors to join our Fibromyalgia Wellness Center for information that could make the difference between a uncomfortable day and a wonderful day. Keep also in mind, October 6th and 7th, we'll be training a number of doctors on our protocols so they can go out and help each and every one of you. Thank you so very, very much. Have a great one. Bye-bye now.